Welcome to the weekly duck migration forecast bonus episode, the late season prediction about what type of weather we would expect in December and January in the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways that would cause duck migration. I remind our listeners and viewers to go to episode 1, where I gave an early season forecast, which predicted what we would see October, November, and then into December and January. So have a look at that. You can compare what I'm going to tell you now with what's happened. Um, for example, I basically predicted a pretty mild October, November. We were coming out of a super hot summer across the globe. There wasn't a lot that was going to indicate a lot of cold outbreaks for Eastern North America. I certainly got that one wrong with the cold front that hit the upper Midwest and into the central flyway, really, the Dakotas, and it leaned down into kind of Iowa and such. It came across Eastern North America a little bit, but really didn't give us much of a punch other than to move some early migrants in, helped us out in the Atlantic Flyway a bit. But right now I'm sitting here in Syracuse, New York, with a predicted temperature, forecasted temperature for today of 73 degrees as a high, which is so we've had record warm temperatures. I think now people have had record warm temperatures across much of Eastern North America. Um, so we've been really mild in the east for the most part, and other than that, I think I pretty much got that early part right. I did predict a lot of wet. I thought some of that wet would spin up into the Great Lakes from the very abundant hurricane season. Most of those kind of peeled out right over Washington D.C. They came into the Gulf and peeled out towards Washington D.C. and missed us. So we're still dry at northern latitudes, and the upper Midwest has um, some real dry conditions in some places as well. And so kind of missed on that one. Got the wet right, just not specific latitudes. So people ask, as far as long-term predictions, how do I do that? There's a few things I look at. There's something called the Snow Advance Index, which is produced by Judah Cohen out of Atmospheric and Environmental Research. That Snow Advance Index is in Siberia. Um, how quickly the snow cover advances in October, and there's more on this in episode 1. I also look at Arctic sea ice, which I explained in episode 1. I didn't really get into La Nina and El Nino too much because I don't have as much faith in them as other folks do. It's been around since 1985. They haven't really advanced it. They haven't added other information to those models. And lots of times it's wrong, but it looks like we're entering a strong La Nina year. And the Snow Advance Index and Arctic sea ice are, I don't know that they're going to play as much of a role this year. So we'll look at how that strong La Nina should affect us and what that is expected there. And then we look at similarities to other years. And 2016 has a lot of similarities right now. And then just general global temperature patterns, right? Like Siberia hit 104 degrees this summer. A lot of things on the planet are really warm. The oceans are extremely warm. And so it takes a long time for the planet itself just to cool down. So we talk about and think about those as well. Let me talk about the Snow Advance Index first. If you look at this chart at the top, that is the relationship between the October SAI in Siberia, which is in the lower right, or Snow Advance Index, and the December, January, February Arctic Oscillation Index. The Arctic Oscillation Index over Eastern North America is the differential between low and high pressure systems at northern latitudes above us and southern latitudes below us that can cause cold outbreaks or bubbles of cold air to move down over the eastern US. And if you look at that relationship, those two lines are very tight, right? That is, the October Snow Advance Index was explaining about 86% of the variation in that December, January, February Arctic Oscillation Index, or explaining our cold outbreaks in Eastern North America. Now, this has recently fallen apart a bit. A lot of what I think is happening, and I've talked with Judah Cohen about this, who came up with this, is that the planet is so damn warm right now, excuse my French, that this this low high pressure system in Siberia just doesn't drive things. It's just warm. The planet's just warm in general, and there's not much that high and low pressure systems very often can do to drive this. But that said, the snow advance index, or the extent of snow cover, is that red line on the left. And if we look at it, it's at the moderate to low end of things. So if we're going to look to the snow advance index this year, it would tell us that in all likelihood, we are going to have a mild December, January, February. The same folks at AER through Judah Cohen's lab are predicting a strong polar vortex. Now, this is different than what you think and how the media has put this up. Strong polar vortex is the image on the left, where there is stable cold air contained at the poles, right? A wavy polar vortex, or a polar vortex disruption on the right, is what causes these cold outbreaks over the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways. And that is really not predictive. There's not a lot that says we're going to have a lot of that waviness this year at this point through the winter. If we look at Arctic sea ice extent, and go back to episode 1, I explained what goes on with Arctic sea ice extent. Actually, low sea ice can produce a situation where pressure systems create a wavy or a polar vortex, or a polar vortex disruption. 2020 sea ice right now is at a record low compared to 2012. If we compare it to 2016, it looks very similar. 2016 was a very, very mild winter. I'll talk to you about what's going on and why there's such low sea ice right now, why it took so long to accumulate here in a second. It actually just has to do with very high temperatures in Siberia that are still pumping warmth into that part of the ocean. So here's that image. This is from August, right? If we look at this area where we have open sea ice right now in the Arctic, it's largely because rivers are still dropping an abundance of very warm water into the Arctic Ocean, in the Arctic Circle, in that part of the world. And that is quite different from just open sea ice from global temperature fluctuations where heat and cold are moving around the planet. This is actually water, warm water, that's entering the Arctic Ocean. So it really changes how these high pressure and low pressure systems are working. And I do not think that open area in the Arctic is going to have the effect that it has in the past, because it's a different mode of operation. So I don't think it's going to be a major player, cause a polar vortex disruption and cold in the eastern US. The other one we can look at, and I'm going to pay a lot of attention to this, I think, is El Nino, because if we look at that red arrow where it says strong El Nino, and look at the bottom, that DJF is December, January, February, and that's a La Nina that's going to bottom out around negative 1.5. To be in a La Nina, the La Nina index has to be below negative 0.5. It's neutral, or has no effect of La Nina or El Nino between negative 0.5 and 0.5. And then above 0.5, it's considered an El Nino. So this year we're in the strong El Nino. And the last two real strong La Nina, excuse me, the last two strong La Ninas were winters 73, 74 and 88, 89, and they were very mild winters in the eastern United States. So what do you get from that? What's the prediction from a La Nina year? This is that, right, warm and dry at southern latitudes. And then the East Coast generally gets warmth. They're not actually talking about a lot of wet in the Great Lakes region this year. That's pretty on par for where we've been at. So, really just an equal chance at this point as far as precipitation. Tough to predict what's going to happen. I expect we'll get some strong snowfall events as this warm and cold equilibrates. The Great Lakes are pretty warm, and as cold water comes across them, there'll be some pretty good snow events: Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. But again, it doesn't look good for our southern counterparts for December and January because it looks like it's going to be warm, looks like it's going to be dry, just like a La Nina year would predict. What have we had so far this year? Again, if you look across the globe here, September 2020, October's predictions by NOAA and the National Climate Data Center have not come out yet. But what we have in general is a pretty warm globe. But yeah, the eastern U.S., if you look at that map, it's either near average or a little cooler than average in some places. You see some pink around the Great Lakes. That's just the Great Lakes staying warm from a pretty warm summer. If we look at the oceans are pretty darn warm as well. But we've had a near average to cooler. And if we look at the temperature ranks by states for October, right? That upper Midwest, right? Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin. That's that one shot of cold. Now you got to think about this. This is one single shot of cold. It changes temperature ranks, but then that doesn't mean that the whole entire month was cold, correct? So if we look at kind of to the upper Midwest, we've had some cold stuff. I think that that extended in Northwest Ontario. It actually moved ducks into the upper portion of the Atlantic Flyway in the Great Lakes region. The question is now whether these ducks that are basically at, let's say, latitude of New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri, if they will move further south, right? Because we did get a good influx of birds. But if you look at the East Coast ranks in general, um, they're they're relatively warm compared to average. This test says pretty much the same thing. This is our temperature and precipitation departures from normal, right? So if you look at the left, we're pretty dry across much of North America, other than kind of the southern end of the Mississippi and Atlantic Flyway. We're well above normal in a lot of places. And then again on the right, the temperature in the mid-continent's been, cold to just below normal, and in the east has been mostly, just above normal slightly. So it's the same kind of split that we've seen, and I think it's going to continue throughout the year, where we mostly see the cold air locked to the west and warm air to the east. How far it pushes into the Mississippi Flyway will really affect what the migration is going to be this December and January. So my long-term forecast isn't so hot in general, or it is hot depending on what you talk about. I think we're going to be really mild in eastern North America, and that includes the Mississippi and Atlantic Flyway. I think we're going to have some cold events in the Central Flyway that can move ducks into the mid and southern latitudes of the Mississippi Flyway, but really a trickling of ducks throughout December and January. I would not predict any massive movements in general. I think stale ducks are going to become common because of locally warm conditions and kind of many options because of the abundance of water that's already at southern latitude. Even if it dries up now, there's just water there for the most part. So birds are going to have a lot of places to go. So you really want to be sure to hunt the best days for new movements of ducks. But again, most of these aren't really predicted to be strong movements. And this isn't a plug to watch my weekly duck migration forecast. This is just what I think is going to happen in December, January. But I think any movements that are going to occur, you're going to want to really hunt those days. They're not going to be massive movements of birds for the most part, but you're going to want to pick those ducks up on those days because a lot of the effect of hunt quality is probably going to be on just that, not that ducks aren't around and that some didn't get there, but that they're just, when it's really warm, they don't move much, right? When you don't have good stormy conditions locally or cold conditions locally, there's really no reason for them to move, especially with the abundance of water. So my recommendation for December, January, for sure, for folks in southern latitudes is really manage disturbance and food. You're kind of behind the eight ball if you didn't manage food at this point. Hopefully you've got a lot of food where you're at to attract birds. But disturbance is probably going to be important when it's mild like that and ducks don't have to move. You got to give them less pressure to shoot them. So, I'd say hunt less but then hunt, make sure you get quality hunts out of those days you go, because pressured birds will just leave an area and kind of have no reason to go back. So it's a tough one this year. I wish everybody luck, but that's my long-term forecast. I don't see a lot that indicates it to be a cold year or in general. That doesn't mean that you won't get into ducks. And, enjoy those days with family and friends and a wet dog. But if this raises any questions, feel free to email me your questions at weeklyduckmigrationforecast@gmail.com. Again, subscribe to this YouTube channel. I do produce the weekly forecasts to the end of January. Try to get them out on Sunday. I start working them on Sunday. I usually get them out Monday, like today. And if you got any other questions, see episode 1 because it has a lot of information on this YouTube channel um, about the application of these weather severity indices and the effect on dabbling duck migration. So, thanks, folks. Good luck this late season, and appreciate y'all listening in and shoot straight.